9 years ago, I walked down the aisle in my family church, a church that I had been baptized in, a church that I had been confirmed in, and a church where my family had been pillars of the church. But this time I walked down the aisle with a sense of trepidation and fear. Maybe it was because I hadn't slept much the previous night. Maybe it was the 3-hour flight and nearly 2 hours from the airport to get home. I had just enough time to get a quick change before heading out to the church. But as I walked down the aisle, familiar faces smiled, acknowledged me. Family members from overseas, friends from overseas, friends from Sri Lanka, as well as colleagues from work, smiled as I walked down the aisle. At the end of the aisle, sitting in the middle of the church, was a coffin. And as I approached this coffin, I squeezed my wife's hands a little bit tighter. Because in that coffin was a man I had known for 40 years. As I approached the coffin and looked at my father, laying there at peace with himself and at peace with the world, I immediately knew what I had to say in his eulogy. Because, being the eldest in the family, I had been asked to say a few words. And as I looked down at him, at this moment in time, I knew exactly what I had to say. And just one word came to mind. And that word was content, or contentment. As I moved to the pew in the front of the church and sat there with my family, my immediate family, I took out a pen and scribbled on the back of an old church bulletin the word content. I then wrote at home, at work, and with life. That's all I wrote. I didn't need to write anything else. The words, the eulogy, what I had to say came to me when I had to talk about my father. It's been 9 years, or nearly 10 years since this day, and I'm getting closer to discovering what my father had found, which is contentment. So in the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the concept of contentment, why I think it's a very deeply individual journey, how I think I might be getting there, or perhaps I've found it, and perhaps an opportunity for you to find it as well. To get to contentment, I'll talk you through a couple of other concepts as well, because I think these concepts are broadly aligned with the term contentment, and that's happiness and success. And why I also think that we need to change our formula on how we view happiness and success. I think there needs to be a paradigm shift in how we look at success. So let's begin with one of the 3 concepts that I'm going to talk to you about. The first one, happiness. And I'm doing this in a particular order for a reason, which you'll discover at the end. So, happiness. What makes you happy? Is it wealth? Is it success? Is it your family? Is it your children? Your friends? Or is it something more personal? Something more individual? A lot of us say that we will be happy if we are successful. And if we work hard and make more money and become a success, we will be happy. But really, is that going to drive us to happiness? In preparation for this TED Talk today, I did a little bit of research looking at some other TED Talks and what other people have talked about and trying to get closer to the idea of contentment. And I came across a talk by a guy called Sean Aker. Sean is the CEO of Good Think Incorporated, a Cambridge, Massachusetts based consulting firm. And he's also a lecturer at Harvard University, where he teaches the concept of positive psychology. In his TED Talk, The Happy Secret to Better Work, he argues that we've been looking at this whole concept of happiness and success backwards. In his talk, he says people say that we need to work and we need to work hard to be a success. But Sean Eck argues that if we are proactive, if we are happy first, we are more likely to be more productive at work and therefore be a success. And I tend to agree with this concept. There are many definitions of happiness in books, guides, videos, and all kinds of lectures on how you can find happiness. So I'm not going to tell you how to find happiness. I think that at the end of the day, happiness is something that's deeply individual. And what makes me happy is not going to make you happy. So it's all about us as individuals. Let's pause for a minute and ask ourselves a question. Think about this very carefully. Who's the happiest person that you have met? Is it the CEO of a multinational company?
My mom.
Is it the president of a country? Was it a millionaire? Was it a billionaire? Having billions of dollars in your bank account surely should make you happy. Now, I haven't met any billionaires as of yet, but I have met CEOs of multinational companies. I've spent time with a few presidents of countries, and I know a few millionaires. And I don't really know whether I would call some of those people the happiest people I have met. Interesting bit of research that I did for this study also was that I wanted to see Google very quickly, who is the happiest person in the world? And there is actually a happiest person in the world. Go ahead and do it, right? And his name, he's a Buddhist monk. He's a French Buddhist monk, so that's confusing already, right? A French Buddhist monk called Matthew Ricard. And they've done cognitive MRI studies on Matthew Ricard at this high-tech lab in the United States that show that he has the highest levels of upbeat emotions and the lowest levels of negative emotions found in a human being. Therefore, he's labeled the happiest man in the world. So, how does he define happiness? And what are his secrets? Well, Ricard says that anyone can be the happiest person in the world if they look for happiness in the right place. What he says is we are always looking for it in the wrong place. The other thing that Ricard said is happiness is not the pursuit of endless successive experiences. So going from one experience to another, as Ricard says, just tires you. It doesn't get you to happiness. And finally, he says that happiness is a skill and it needs to be cultivated. We all have the potential to do it, but you have to examine what contributes to making you happy. So it's about you as an individual. And it goes back to what I said at the start of describing happiness, which is it's something that is deeply individual. So happiness is something that's deeply individual. Let's move on to the next idea, which is around success. Most of us associate success with wealth and career. And I thought it would be really good to look at some successful people and see how they define success. When we talk about successful people, I think we are typically talking about someone who's got billions of dollars in their bank. They are either the CEO of a multinational company, or better still, somebody like Bill Gates who's got their own company, or they lead a country, or they have a business somewhere that's perhaps writing books, bestsellers, where they're making billions of dollars by the sale of their books. But if you ask these people who fit what society's definition of success is, as to what is success, they say something completely different. And I just noted down some key people that most of us would be aware of and know. So Richard Branson, to him, true success should be measured by how happy you are. That's what Branson says. Billionaire investor Warren Buffett, who is one of the wealthiest people in the world. I think he keeps shifting between either the second or the third person when he sort of is usually compared to Bill Gates. Mm-hmm. He's the chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, and he once told shareholders at a meeting that I measure success by how many people love me. which I think is a very interesting concept. And former US President Barack Obama, please bring him back, does not equate success with power. And he was one of the most powerful people in the world. But he says success is being able to make a difference in people's lives. And finally, the late author Stephen Covey, who himself became a success by writing a book called The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, defined success in the way that I define success, which is that it is something deeply individual. For Covey, success was something that was categorically about the individual. And interestingly, what Covey says is that when you at your funeral, what would you want somebody to say about you? And that should be your definition of success. So let me tell you why Covey is right and why I define success and also happiness as something that is individual. Look at this slide. This is a very common definition of success. So either you are successful or you are unsuccessful. And this is how society defines us. You might want to sit yourself along the fence somewhere along this spectrum, but society's definition is either you are a success or you are unsuccessful. But what happens if we took ourselves out of this common equation, out of society's equation, and actually strongly believe that you are successful? So not falling to societal norms, but to the norms that you think are important to yourself as an individual. I want to tell you a story about another man. This is a man that I've known for close to 20 years. His name is Vimal. Vimal is a tuk-tuk driver, or as in Sri Lanka, we call them trishaws. Riding a trishaw in Sri Lanka is a unique experience. You start off your journey by praying to God or whatever deity you believe in, that you'll actually make it to your destination. Because, simply put, these trishaw drivers are maniacs on the road. They zip in, zip out through traffic, and they won't hesitate to make a 90-degree turn in front of a lumbering bus. So essentially, you're crapping your pants the whole journey because you just want to make sure I get to my destination. It also doesn't help, and I couldn't find the one that I had seen some time ago, but there's a thing called tuk-tuk art or tuk-tuk quotes. And it doesn't help when you have quotes like, "No seat belts needed, for tomorrow we die." That's the kind of attitude that they have. So Vimal is a bit of an he's a bit of an exception to the rule because he's somebody who drives generally reasonably well, and I've always trusted him and given him the opportunity and gone with him. Last year, I was in Sri Lanka, and something after about a period of 5 years, I saw Vimal on the side of the road, and he came and met with me, and we had a conversation because I knew we always talked about our families. And while he took me from the side of the road to my home, I asked him how life was treating him. And he said, "Sir, I'm very happy and I'm very proud. My daughter has gone to university and is now getting married. My son has passed his engineering apprenticeship and is now looking for a job, and I've been able to build a new house for my family." So, is Vimal a success? I think he is. He's certainly very happy. But in terms of society's definition of success, and certainly the definition of success in Sri Lanka, he is not a success because he's a trishaw driver. He doesn't hold a high-powered job, right? He's not university educated, so perhaps not a success. But this goes back. But Vimal believes he's a success and he's happy, and I think that is really what is key. He as an individual believes that he's successful. So this goes back to what Stephen Covey and Sean Aker talk about, that success and happiness are both things that are deeply individual. Finally, I want to talk to you about contentment. I know I'm running short of time, so I'm going to speed through this. Contentment is described by the Oxford Dictionary as a state of happiness and satisfaction. While I agree with this description, I prefer the description of contentment in Wikipedia, and I want to read this out to you. Wikipedia describes contentment as a mental or emotional state of satisfaction, may be drawn from being at ease with one situation of body and mind. A lot of us would challenge this because this is essentially saying you should be content with who you are. And I've struggled with this idea of contentment because does contentment mean not having ambition, not wanting to better yourself? And over the years, over the 10 years that since I was at my father's funeral, I've come to the realization that no, it doesn't. I am happy with what I've achieved in my life, in my work. I believe I'm a success. And at the end of the day, I don't need to care what society thinks. I shouldn't care what society thinks. If I believe I'm a success, I'm happy, and I'm enjoying this life that I've been given, I really think that that is the key. So contentment, in my opinion, cannot be achieved by having more material things, more abstract things, as well as inanimate objects. I think it is about what makes you truly happy. My father was also a keen fisherman, or as an angler, as you would say, and he instilled this love of fishing for my brother and I. And a few years before he died, we went out fishing on this river in Sri Lanka, fishing for barramundi, and barramundi is a type of fish. And within 1 hour of fishing, my father caught a fish, I caught a fish, but then we spent the next 3 hours riding from one end of the river to the other, didn't catch anything. I was a bit disappointed. I'm sure my brother was because he hadn't caught anything on the trip. But when we came back to shore, to my wife's house, and I was showing the fish to my wife and kids, my dad said, "Son, that was a great day." And I kind of scratched my head to think, well, we could have actually caught more fish. We spent 4 hours on the water and only caught 2 fish. But then I kind of looked back and I thought, hey, it was actually. We were happy because we had a great day as the 3 men in the family on the water. The day was a success. We had caught 2 fish. And really, we were content because we had caught 2 fish. 1 fish too many, in fact. So, contentment will come not from having more wealth, a bigger house, a fancier car. It is just being happy with yourself as an individual in your present situation. I'll end with this story. When I was about 10 years old, I got a present of a book about the Olympic Games. It was the history of the modern Olympic Games, so I think starting from 1796, if I have my dates right. And I can't remember a lot of the stories. There were a lot of stories about famous athletes and things like that, people like Jesse Owens. But there was a phrase in this book that has always stuck in my memory. And that is that the phrase goes like this: "But when that great scorer comes to write against your name, he'll write not that you won or lost, but how you played the game." And how apt is that quote? Because really at the end of it, it's not whether you won or lost. It's not whether you're a success or whatever. It's how you played the game of life. Are you content with this life that you've been given? 9 years ago, I came face to face with a man who had found contentment in his life. As I looked at my father lying in peace, and as I delivered the eulogy of his content life, I realized that I too can find contentment. But it is something that's deeply individual. And it's the same for all of you. It is something that's going to be deeply individual. The true test of this, I hope, is a long, long way away. Because one day when somebody walks down the aisle and looks at me lying in that coffin, I hope that if they have one phrase to describe me, that phrase will be content. Thank you.